everyone. Welcome to BoF Voices 2022. I am clearly not Tim Blanks. Sadly, Tim could not be with us here tonight as he had to get back to London. But I'm sitting in Tim's chair, which is a real honor. And I am here with two amazing friends of mine who gladly graced us with their presence here at BoF Voices. But before we dive into a conversation with them, we're going to take a look back at some of our speakers from today. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back.
And I'm a heavy believer that visuals can change a nation.
And to everyone watching back home from Africa, Ghana, everywhere in the world, all I'm saying is everything is so possible.
My father's quote, specialness is nice to have, but what's more important is being made for all.
Now we go to the world of food.
Food is so often the entry point to learning about a new culture. And it is something that we all have to engage in. We all have to eat. And it is the number one bonding experience that you can do with somebody that engages all the senses other than sex.
I was the disruptor, the outsider, the renegade.
I had a daughter by the time I went to jail. And at that point, I said, you know what? I got to change my life. I can't continue to do this.
They dance and they rebuilt the houses at the same time. So this is a very, very bright example of who Ukrainians are.
Once you see the beauty of equal opportunities, of rights, of dignity, it is really hard to imagine a life without it.
So let's just be a little bit kinder to each other. And especially refugees, just see them with a different mindset.
Every time a situation is complicated, I say to myself, you'll find a solution. Be patient. And patience is super important, in life.
And it's okay if you're the underdog. It's okay if you're not the popular one. It's okay if you're different. It's about embracing who you are and being proud of that.
Are we all having a good time? Learning? Excited? Mind is buzzing?
As you can see, it was a jam-packed day here at BoF Voices. And I think, my goal for this session in taking place of Tim Blanks is to do as good a job as he has done. And luckily, I have two wonderful individuals here joining me to share their reflections. Carlos Nazario, Global Fashion Director of ID. It's your first Voices.
It is.
And I'm really always curious for someone who comes here for the first, I find it so hard to describe what happens here. How would you describe it?
I sort of didn't know what to expect coming here, and it's a little bit outside of my comfort zone. I think what we do as creative people especially, it can be very sort of solitary. We work in our own little bubbles, whether it be at our magazines or in our practices. So to come and sort of exchange information and energy with so many different people this way has been really, really extraordinary. I have to say what you guys have built here has been just, it's really amazing. I don't think coming here I thought that I would be quite so moved by a lot of the people that I met or a lot of the stories that I heard, or that I would meet people who were so willing to sort of be taught and be inspired. So I think that was my biggest takeaway for the week.
Got it. Alok, Voices veteran. When you think about Voices, and you gave a kind of barn-raising closing talk here, what, 2018? 19. What does Voices represent for you now that you've been coming back regularly?
Yeah, I think it's an incubation center where we can actually dream about the future of fashion together. In an industry that's so often marked by competition, there's genuine collaborative energy here, where people are constantly cross-pollinating across disciplines, across fields and industries. I think it's also really exciting for me how here fashion is kind of the common thread to speak about history, ancestry, culture. There's so many people here who don't see themselves as part of the fashion world, but they're wearing clothes, so I guess they're part of the fashion world.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea is that if we can use this platform, literally this stage that we're sitting on, to bring to bear, to bring to light issues that we feel are important to be discussed. We use fashion as kind of the entry point to have those discussions because it's such a big part of culture today. But it enables us to kind of transport ourselves all over the place. And we did that this morning with our session on global culture and creativity. And I want to go back to this quote from, or this segment from Echo Barnes, who came in from Accra, Ghana, yesterday evening and managed to get here on time to join us on stage. And Accra and Campbell Addy gave such an interesting perspective on how visuals can shape a nation. Let's take a look.
One way or the other, Africa is not just one country. It's a whole big continent altogether. Whenever people think about Africa, it's like just one side that we always see. It's a whole huge people with different culture that connect us together. When you come to Ghana, when you come to Nigeria, we have South Africa, Mali, and all these places. So many beautiful creatives back home. And so I would urge everyone in this room that everything is really possible in Ghana whenever you come to Africa. There are a lot of creatives you can actually work with. Yeah.
Specialness is nice to have, but what's more important is being made for all. This idea of made for all, creating something for all people regardless of race, gender, sexuality, nationality, religion, age, politics, or disability, is at the very, very core of a Uniqlo brand concept.
That was Koji Yanai, who came to us from Tokyo to share his Tokyo toilet project, which was kind of incredible. Alok, what were your takeaways from what Koji had to share with us?
That was actually one of my favorite talks of the day because it shows us that actually the project is about shifting imagination, that things can be redesigned, of course, but we have to redesign our imagination of them first. I think about a writer, Gloria Nzeldua, who says that things have to happen in our heads before they happen in the world. So we see these things, toilets, as undignified, uncreative, functional, physiological spaces. And what he did in his talk today was ask, why is that? What if we actually brought the kind of creative zest and rigor into the design of toilets such that actually shifted our imagination of this as a space that we should curate, that we should preserve, that we should keep sanitary and clean. And I thought it was a great application of what artists can do. They can help us reimagine everything.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of the toilet as a space for creativity is something that had never even crossed my mind before. But when I heard about Koji's project, it instantly appealed to me because it's so unexpected. Carlos, what did you think?
I was kind of intrigued by it. I mean, the toilet as a great equalizer, like we all have to use the bathroom, right? And to be able to utilize that as a space to inspire people, I thought was really something that's going on in our world right now. I think you find people all across the world who are utilizing different means to connect with people from every walk of life.
So what do you think the takeaways were for the fashion industry from what Koji had to say?
Yeah, I think one of the recurring themes today was the materiality of images. That even before we have language or ideas, we have images. And that aesthetics can actually be a form of education. Mm-hmm. So we have to think critically about what images we're putting out in the world because those images speak and those images create policies. When I'm thinking about cultural change as an image maker, I think, what are the images we should be populating in the world that make a better world, not a worse one? And so I think what Koji's talk really helps us do is, how can we create images that create more dignified, more humane systems and worlds? And that's what fashion could be doing.
Yeah, and actually that's a brilliant segue to the real Echo Barnes. Let's take a look at Echo and we can come back and hear what he had to say.
There are so many great designers, writers, musicians, everyone back home. All we need is a very big platform. It should always not be one-sided that whenever there is, let's say, an inclusion, we always talk about inclusion, but Africa is left out when it comes to inclusion. Because sometimes it's always like, okay, just maybe someone coming from this side, maybe like especially my brother here, Campbell, who has the privilege to be here. If he hasn't not been here, I'm not sure they would have known him. That's not how we want the world to be. If we are all as one people, like the World Cup is happening, then whenever people are coming down to Ghana, to Nigeria, you should include the local creatives because there are so many talent. And to everyone watching back home from Africa, Ghana, everywhere in the world, all I'm saying is everything is so possible. Just keep on praying, keep being hard work, and keep on working hard, and also be consistent. You get there one way or the other. Thank you so much.
High
guys.
five.
Very much.
That was such a beautiful moment. And, going back to what you were saying, Alok, it's like the images we create, those are the stories we tell. And we leave those stories, when we leave those stories to be told by people who are not from the places we're telling the stories about, we create what, Campbell and Echo were calling biases.
Yeah, and one of the points that they raised too is what images populate in our mind when we think about Ghana, and why is that? And how actually Ghanaian creatives are creating a counter archive that actually says there's life here, there's wonder here, there's brilliance here. I think for so long the fashion industry has extracted and mined from African creatives, but not meaningfully collaborated with them. And so I saw that talk today as a really powerful intervention to say, it's not just about drawing or deriving inspiration, it's actually about working with us.
Yeah, Carlos, you're an image maker. You have created some incredibly powerful images this year that, you and I had spoken about over lunch back in Paris a few months back. When you're thinking about how the industry can be more thoughtful and considered about the images it creates and projects all around the world, what advice do you have to share?
I mean, I was so moved by Echo and Campbell because I can really relate to feeling like an outsider, being sort of accepted in a very superficial way, being sort of one of, but then attempting to tell your story in a way that feels really authentic to you, in a way that maybe feels foreign to the audience that fashion people presume we're speaking to. And I think the power of image is so underestimated, I think. And what they were talking about with taking back the narrative, I think is something that's not discussed enough. Echo's talked a lot about representation, and he talked a lot about inclusion. But inclusion in terms of allowing one person or a number of people in, but not really accepting the entire group that they represent. So that, I thought, was a really powerful message. And I think the fashion industry in general has done a lot of talking in the last 2 years about representation and inclusion. I don't know that we've seen such substantive changes, but as people like Echo and Campbell continue to rise, I think we're seeing a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, that's the lesson I actually took away from the next talk I wanted to refer to, which is Soon Abbey's talk, a transgender woman leading one of the largest beauty companies in the world, probably, and don't fact check me on this, but probably the only transgender woman at the helm, a multi-billion-dollar organization. Let's go back and, refresh our minds on what Sue shared with us.
So at a very young age, I understood that there is the conventional classical beauty and there is the different one, the one that also speaks to a lot of us, in fact. And it gave me the permission, in fact, to dare both, to play with both, to say I would love to look like Isabella Rossellini, but I would also love to look like Steve Strange, who was painting his face in white and having, this kind of, like a Pierrot, and he was having this very strange makeup, etc. And this helped me to define a kind of understanding of what people are looking for.
Oh, look, I'm sure that was a meaningful talk for you to hear. We often talk in our industry is that we want people sitting at the decision-making table, whether that's the creative leaders or the business leaders. Sue is a business leader at the head of this big beauty company. How does that make our industry better in meaningful, practical, pragmatic ways?
Yeah, I think that clip really illustrates what I'm about to say. to have Steve Strange on the mood board, right? When we have diverse people in the room, we have a diverse archive that we're drawing from. We have a diverse set of ideas, which create more resilient organizations that are more easily able to adapt to shifting demographics and to a shifting climate across the world. I think so often diversity and inclusion is discussed as a favor extended to a small minority that's only going to help enfranchise a small group. But I want us to reimagine diversity and inclusion as creating more resilient, powerful, and dynamic organizations and businesses that can actually create better product for all people. So what I saw in that clip was she has a vast archive that's not been considered as high beauty. Because I think so many times, and we saw this later today with Fecal Matter on stage, so many times some of the most creative and visionary people have been gatekept out of fashion. And that's not just to the detriment of those people, it's to the detriment of fashion.
Carlos, is our industry changing fast enough when it comes to these kinds of topics around diversity and inclusion?
I think it's hard to say if it's changing fast enough because for so long it was just so one thing.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up sort of obsessed with beauty and fashion, but never seeing anyone that looked or felt like myself or anyone around me in it. And I remember just feeling like, do I not matter? Do we not matter? Are we not considered to be beautiful? And it didn't deter me, but I imagine that for an entire generation of people it did. And so now that we're playing catch up, I think that we need to be a little bit more vigilant. And, you know, we were having a conversation about body diversity, which I think goes alongside this conversation, and how this season we saw a lack of plus-sized or curved girls on the runway, which was really a step back from where we've been in previous seasons. And I do feel that happening sometimes with diversity and just with varied voices. I think, you know, fashion has a tendency to pick a topic of the moment, a catchphrase. You know, maybe right now it's the environment. Maybe last season it was body diversity, and the season before that it was ethnic diversity. And I think that we do need to stay on top of it and make sure that we're moving. So I don't know if we're moving fast enough, but I know we have a lot of work to do.
But you know, you're sitting in this position now where, you know, you get to, you know, lead some of the most powerful images. You know, the image that you created with Paloma Alcesar for the cover of ID earlier this year. I mean, that was one of the most seen images of the year, I'd argue. I mean, clearly having people with different backgrounds in these positions where, you know, we're around the table now and we can actually help set the agenda. And like, that is progress.
That is progress, but more often than not, you would be surprised how often I am the only person of color in the room, still. For the vast majority of my clients, for the vast majority of magazines that I work for, the vast majority of think tanks that I'm a part of, with other decision makers and thought leaders, I'm still frequently the only one. And I know that there are other people of color, most of whom I'm very good friends with, who feel that they're in a position of power, but also in a position of visibility. So, you know, you sort of also have to question why and who is placed where they are. And I think it's still really important to understand that as much as I can control the images that I create, to a certain extent, I don't make all those decisions. You know, we still have bosses. Unfortunately, those bosses, be they the advertisers that, you know, pay for our magazines or the clients that choose to hire us. So progress has been made. There's a lot more people that look like us, but it's not nearly enough.
Okay. Let's look now at a clip from Victoria Beckham, who we described as a shapeshifter on the Voices stage.
I feel that the fashion industry has really welcomed me. I don't feel like I've had any knockbacks, to be honest with you. I've had to prove myself, but then I've always had to prove myself. You know, when I was at school, I had to prove myself. When I was at dancing school, I had to prove myself. Even now, I feel like I'm constantly having to prove myself when everyone says I can't sing. Not that I don't care anymore, but, you know, it's always been about that. But with fashion, I think I didn't feel that I had any knockbacks at all. I felt that it was just about the product speaking for itself. And it did. And every season, I want to better myself for me, really, and for my community and for my customer.
So, were either of you Spice Girl fans?
Of course.
Yeah? I mean, what do you make of the transformation of Victoria Beckham and this idea that she didn't face any knockbacks in the fashion industry?
Yeah, you know, Spice World was on repeat in my home, and I made my entire extended family watch it. So I was a huge Spice Girls fan. And the thing that I found most interesting that she spoke about was the double-edged sword of celebrity. She says, on the one hand, I get more recognition, but then also more scrutiny because people want me to fail. There's a sense of like the press story that comes from that. And that's something I hadn't considered, actually, is that I think the easy narrative would be you have a lot more access to capital, to funders, attention, clicks, but also haters, people who are naysayers, people who doubt you, people who want you to stay in your lane. And I can respect that that actually is quite difficult to enter into a new industry, especially when people have spent your entire life telling you what to do.
Yeah. Carlos?
Interestingly, as an assistant, I worked with Victoria, so I've known her for a long time. And I can say that she's one of the most hardworking women I've ever had the pleasure of working alongside. I don't think she takes it for granted. In fact, I think she takes her responsibility as a boss and, you know, as someone who is responsible for a big company very seriously. But fashion's hard, right? And I think anyone who runs their own business will readily tell you, like, there's a lot of days when you just don't know how you're gonna make it to the end of the day. So I don't know if she delved that deeply into that part, but, you know.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I had the pleasure of interviewing her 10 years ago, and the kind of thing that came out in that conversation, the thing that came out today is, I think that's lost on a lot of people because she's Victoria Beckham and everyone kind of thinks, oh, Victoria Beckham. She works really hard.
She works really hard.
Yeah.
I think she works harder
than
a lot of other people.
Exactly.
And I think, to your point, people really do build you up to tear you down. I think there's a certain level of success that you reach when then people feel like, okay, this person doesn't need the support, or they don't need the encouragement, or, you know, they don't need to continue to be given the same amount of grace that other people are given. So I think that's really tough. And I think, you know, I'm sure like 4 or 5 negative Instagram comments, I don't know about you, but for me, it's like my week is ruined, you know? So I can't imagine being in that level of spotlight where every move is really scrutinized to that level.
Alok has an amazing way of dealing with that kind of online abuse.
Tell me, I need it.
Yeah, we were just talking about therapy earlier.
Yeah.
Your projection is not my reality, right? People who would rather waste their time and mine belittling other people that they don't even know. I think about the Moschino quote, nobody's ever made a monument to a critic. And this idea that actually our energy could be better spent creating a more viable and beautiful alternative. And so people are telling on themselves constantly when they're resorting to negativity and toxicity. What they're telling is that they don't think that their lives are worth leisure and joy. And what they're saying is that I'd rather allocate my energy to destruction than creation. So I respond with mercy and compassion because I believe that their life and my life and all of our lives are worth adornment with joy and peace, not suffering.
Wow.
Which kind of reminds me of the conversation we had about we heard about Ukraine today, where there's so much suffering happening, where there's untold misery, there's blackouts, there's no heat. You know, it's creativity in a war zone, which I found just kind of mind-blowing to see some of the examples that Olya and Julie shared with us. And I think that, you know, when we can respond to situations of extreme challenge, or when someone's taking us on, if we can respond with this creative energy, this kind of soulful love, it's the best. One, it gives you a way of kind of getting through it. It like helps you deal with the kind of blowback. But two, it can create incredibly beautiful things.
I think that video clip that they showed of people raving and reconstructing buildings that had been decimated by war was one of the most powerful images and videos I've ever seen in my life. It's a testament to the resilience of Ukrainian people and also what it means to resist at a different frequency, to refuse to compromise our dignity, our humor, our levity, our capacity for pleasure and joy in suffering. To be able to hold the both and, I think, is such a generous offering to the world.
Does creativity play that role for you in any way, Carlos, as a way of kind of responding to kind of terrible situations or negativity or suffering?
Sure. I mean, I really connected with Larry's story today, and you know, I'm from Queens, New York, maybe not as rough as West Philadelphia, but certainly up there. And I think growing up, in order to visualize a place where you were happy and you were successful and you were sort of existing beyond whatever your current circumstances were, like, you had to have a really creative vision. You had to have an imagination, and that has served me so well. And I think that still exists today. You know, I think we're living in a time that's so filled with depression and sadness and destruction every day. And I think those of us who are lucky enough to work in a creative field and imagine a future that doesn't exist like this, it's a special and valuable gift to be able to create right now.
Indeed. Let's have a look at the closing talk of the day. I had the honor of sitting down with Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Inequality, climate change, poverty. So education is at the center of all of this. To me, what matters the most is equality for everyone, and especially for women. And I know that in order to achieve gender equality for women, we have to invest in education for girls so that they get to the stage where they can have access to more opportunities in their lives.
So Carlos, you know, I asked Malala this question at the end, like, what did you take away from this experience? What did you learn from the speakers? You know, what will be the things that you'll go back to your partner and other people in your life and share with them?
I thought some of the recurring themes of transformation, providing services for people that really enrich their lives, and we heard that across all the different industries, so technology and climate change, certainly fashion people. I think everyone's looking for a deeper connection to the brands that we interact with, and also to the products that we're selling people, essentially. The power of image and how seriously I think we are really taking that right now. It really resonated with me because I don't actually like clothes that much, which I know is like a strange thing for stylists to say, but like the power and the transformative nature of fashion and the power of image has always been what made me want to work in this industry. So it's nice that people are taking that responsibility more seriously and speaking about it.
Alok, your big takeaways?
Yeah, I think the capacity to redesign not just fashion, but the world, and how fashion, once again, is a case study, and how we can come back and see the world we're creating as a rough draft that can be continually refined and revised and edited to make it fit better to a more diverse, more complicated, and more wondrous society.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really nice wrap-up of, you know, everything that we've talked about this week at Voices. Thank you both for taking the time to share the space with me and your feedback and reflections. We have a gala to go get ready for.
Outfit changes to be had.
I'm not going to keep you for much longer, but Thank you as well for joining us. And if you need to see, or if you missed some of the talks, they're all going to be available on demand. Make sure you go and catch up on them. And for the last time this year, I bid you farewell from BoF Voices 2022.